You ever have one of those mornings where everything feels normal? Breakfast, backpack, the usual walk to school, and then out of nowhere a single second rips your whole day apart. That's how my story starts. 3 sentences and a kid in scuffed sneakers gets called a liar in front of his whole class. The teacher rips his paper to shreds, and the rest of the room watches like it's entertainment. You don't forget the sound of paper tearing. It lives with you. So, yeah, stick with me. Act 1. Hook, the moment that breaks a kid. My name was Jaden Cole back then. We lived in a small rental near Fort Langley, not far from the base, but far enough that neighbors didn't ask a lot of questions. My dad wore plain clothes when he came home. He shuffled in with a coffee mug and a tired smile like any dad might, and my mom worked nights at the hospital. Nobody had flags on the mantel, nobody had framed medals on the wall, not because we were ashamed, but because the work my dad did meant keeping a low profile. That's the kind of life where you learn to be quiet about the loud things. It was career day at Willow Park Elementary. I'd been buzzing for weeks. I wrote my paragraph with careful letters. My dad is a 4-star general in the United States Army. He has served for 30 years deployed overseas, and he teaches leaders how to lead. I wrote it like it was a secret treasure. I wanted to make my mom and dad proud. Simple kid stuff. But Mrs. Ellen Rhodes, she'd been teaching forever, wore her flag pin every day, knew how a real military family should look. She read my first line, smirked, and then she did something I'll never forget. She grabbed my paper and ripped it into pieces like it was trash. Paper bits fluttered across the floor by my sneakers. Her voice cut through the hush. You don't get to invent that kind of life, Jaden. Generals don't live in rentals. Their kids don't wear sneakers like that. Don't make yourself out to be something you aren't. The room smelled like cafeteria pizza and embarrassment. I felt hot, shrinking in my chair like silence had weight. Kids stared, parents leaned back in folding chairs, and my friend Marcus mouthed, "No way," like maybe this was a prank. But it wasn't. That was the punch. The teacher's laughable certainty wrapped up like punishment. Act 2. The struggle and the turning point. 2 hours before my dad had texted, flight got moved up. Landing at 10. Don't tell anyone, surprise. I kept it to myself because we keep things quiet for a reason. Security, he would say. Not showy, not for attention. It's how we stayed safe. But Mrs. Rhodes didn't know any of that. She had made up her mind just by looking at me, and when a person like that decides who you are, you either let it stick or push back. She called me up to the front to correct my story. I tried to explain. My voice sounded like someone else's. "Ma'am, he really is a general." She rolled her eyes. "I've taught here 25 years. I know how these things work. You're embellishing." She demanded I apologize, rewrite the assignment, and basically vanish into shame. I remember walking out into the hallway with my backpack straps biting my shoulders, feeling too young to own the anger building in my chest. Marcus tried to stand up for me and got told to sit down. No one wanted a scene. That's what hurt. People would rather be comfortable than right. I sat in the principal's office, and the assistant principal said the usual things adults say to make kids feel small. You know how this looks. Like adult talk that cares more about paperwork than feelings. Then something happened that changed everything. Black SUVs rolled up, men in dark suits moved like they had a plan, and my dad walked in wearing the full-dress uniform you only see in parades or movies. But this was real. 4 stars on his shoulders, medals quiet and precise on his chest. He didn't storm in like he was there to punish someone. He came in like he came to collect his kid. When he walked into my classroom, the room shifted. People straightened not because they wanted to, but because rank does that to a room. He didn't shout. He didn't humiliate anyone. He walked to me, got down on his knees, and put his face close to mine, like he was anchoring me back into being his son instead of some rumor someone could shred. "I'm here," he said, and that was enough. But then he asked the thing adults rarely ask. What happened? Mrs. Rhodes tried to explain herself, how she verified things, how she knew from experience. My dad listened, then he spoke to the whole room. Not to make a scene, not to weaponize his uniform, but to teach. He said something like this: "Assumption is dangerous. You do not get to decide someone's truth because it makes you feel safe. He told the kids about deployments, about missing birthdays, about how families like ours move and vanish, and that doesn't make our stories any less true. He didn't yell. His calm cut deeper than that. It made people look at the pieces of paper on the floor and feel the wrongness of it. And then the classroom did something rarer than I expected. Mrs. Rhodes broke. She cried, really cried, right there in front of everyone. She said she was wrong, that she'd judged me because of how I looked and where I lived, not because she'd asked. My dad didn't humiliate her for it. He placed a small challenge in her hand, a coin, a tradition in his unit for when someone admits they were wrong and wants to do better. He gave it to her and said, "Use this to remember." That moment, humiliation turned into accountability and then into a promise for change. Hit me like the first time you realize adults can mess up and also fix things. Act 3. Resolution that feels earned with a question left hanging. The school didn't sweep it under the rug. They implemented bias training. The teachers had to go through sessions about assumptions and the harm of knowing someone before you ask. Mrs. Rhodes led some of them, and it wasn't performative. She told her colleagues how she'd failed a kid and that it had tore her up. The students made a Believe First pledge. Little cards, handshakes, whatever kids do to make a pact, and I helped start a group where kids could share their stories without being laughed at. I won't lie, the internet made us into a snapshot. The picture of my dad kneeling beside me went viral and strangers had lots to say. Some called for firings, some called for a parade, some made it about politics and missed the point. But the real win wasn't the retweets or the angry comments. It was the kids in my school who started raising their hands again, who stopped shrinking when asked about their families. It was the way my teacher left her old assumptions behind and started listening first. Here's the part I don't want you to miss. This wasn't some cinematic revenge. My dad didn't use his badge to get me back. He used it to show how people should behave when the truth faces doubt. He used his presence to say you don't humiliate a child. You ask questions. You don't make a kid feel less because their life doesn't look like yours. You listen. And that changed a lot more than one classroom. So now I leave this with you, an open question. What would you have done in that classroom? Would you have stood up? Would you have sat quietly? Are you the kind of person who tests a kid's story before tearing it apart, or the kind who trusts the voice small enough to still sound like a kid? And if you lead a school, a team, a family, what systems do you have so that assumptions don't become harm? If this hit you, and I know some part of it probably did, do 2 things. 1, tell your story in the comments. Have you ever been dismissed for your truth? Or did you ever dismiss someone else and wish you hadn't? 2, share this video, not for my moment, but so more people consider how fast they rush to judge. Hit subscribe if you want more stories about everyday people standing their ground. And if you think schools should do better, say so below. Don't let this be another viral moment that fades. Let it be a reminder that believing first can change a kid's whole life.